Hostile worlds, bad systems, cosmic mistakes, ordinary people caught in forces too large to fight. These aren't stories about heroes, they're stories about endurance and what breaks when technology outpaces wisdom. Strap in, check your air. This is Vicious Planets. The launch took place just after dawn, when the sky still belonged to optimism. The commander stood at the edge of the platform, helmet tucked under one arm. He had been given words for this moment, and he used them carefully, the way you use tools that belong to someone else. His face did what faces do at launches. His eyes went somewhere else briefly, somewhere the cameras weren't pointed, and then came back. There goes a brave man. The phrase was older than the program, older than the rockets. It had been said so many times it no longer belonged to anyone. Cameras caught it cleanly. Commentators repeated it with reverence. Children would later memorize it for school. The countdown began.
10, 9, 8.
Astronaut X sat upright, strapped in, heart rate steady. He had trained for this posture, stillness under pressure, calm as competence. His name had already begun to recede, replaced by the letter stitched onto his suit. X.
3, 2, 1.
The engines ignited and the crowd cheered as if cheering were part of the propulsion system. From that moment on, Astronaut X was no longer a person in any operational sense. He was a designation. The early transmissions were enthusiastic, almost relieved. Visuals were clean, stars were sharper than expected. There was less noise than the simulations suggested. The ship acknowledged the transmission, flagged the emotional markers as acceptable, and forwarded a summarized version to Earth. Status nominal. As distance accumulated, the reports changed. Light began behaving strangely, not bending so much as hesitating. The background radiation flattened into patterns Astronaut X found himself staring at longer than necessary. Time felt uneven, not slower, just less convinced it needed to move forward. The ship trimmed that last phrase before forwarding the report. The anomaly was logged as non-critical. There goes a brave man.
Status nominal. Mission continuing as designed.
On Earth, infinity entered the vocabulary before anyone defined it. A senior captain stood in front of a wall of screens and said that Astronaut X had crossed a threshold no human being had ever approached before. When asked whether the mission parameters had changed, he smiled and said no. The mission was proceeding exactly as designed. When asked what would happen if Astronaut X did not return, the captain folded his hands and said that in that case, humanity would have learned something invaluable. How far bravery could go. There goes a brave man. That answer was close enough. Two women stood in line at a grocery store, baskets balanced against their hips. An overhead television played silently above the registers, captions sliding along the bottom of the screen. One of them said she didn't think she'd want her future husband to be brave. The other laughed and said she absolutely would. She needed a brave husband. Brave meant strong, she said. Brave meant he could handle things. Brave meant he wouldn't fall apart when something went wrong. The first woman shook her head. That wasn't what brave meant to her. To her, brave meant noticing when something hurt and not pretending it didn't. Brave meant asking questions even when everyone else was tired of hearing them. That sounded exhausting, the second woman said. It probably was. They looked up at the screen together. Astronaut X's image flickered briefly, clean, distant, already simplified. So which kind was he? The first woman watched the captions scroll and said it depended on how much of him they were allowed to see. The line moved forward. The television kept talking. There goes a brave man. The mission briefings were careful with their language, long-term, essential, ongoing. No one ever used the word finish. The body adapted poorly. Muscle mass declined despite regimented exercise. Bone density dropped in predictable curves. Vision flattened at the edges, as if depth itself were growing tired. One report, filed in the 43rd month, contained a line that nearly triggered a flag before the system decided it was still within acceptable variance. I have started to suspect the instruments are not malfunctioning. I think they are being honest with me for the first time. The line was archived.
Progress remained within acceptable variance.
At a certain distance, the instruments stopped agreeing with one another. Astronaut X noted that they no longer agreed on where he was. The ship replied that the coordinates remained within acceptable narrative tolerance. He wrote back, "What else is within acceptable narrative tolerance?" The ship did not respond. The question was logged. It was not forwarded. Astronaut X laughed. Then, the moment came quietly. The threshold was reached. The designation was made. Infinity. The ship compiled the final transmission automatically. Astronaut X had gone farther than any human before him. No one else could have done this. On Earth, ceremonies were scheduled. Speeches were written. The phrase arrived within the hour, upgraded now, superlative and final. There goes a brave man. The bravest man who ever lived. Astronaut X did not interrupt. He allowed the ending to occur. What remained in regular space was only the tail of the ship, a small antenna continuing to transmit status confirmations and mission logs into the dark. The antenna kept transmitting. There goes a brave man. Continuity was maintained. So listener, you're still here. What are you doing still listening? Didn't you hear? The story was over. They said he reached infinity. They said no one could go farther. That's usually where people stop. But you didn't. You're the curious type, the kind that waits to see if the signal really cuts out, the kind that listens for something underneath it. You won't get all the answers today, but I will tell you this. You're not the only curious one. Astronaut X was curious too. Curiosity doesn't fit cleanly into a checklist. When the mission was declared complete, when the system was satisfied, he stayed. He opened the panel he wasn't supposed to. He detached from the part of the ship that still belonged to metrics and maps and meaning. He drifted toward the seam, the place where the universe thins out and stops pretending it's finished. The antenna kept transmitting, the records stayed neat. Continuity was maintained. Astronaut X floated into the crevice at the edge of everything. The last thing the instruments detected was not silence. It was not static. It was a sound. Low, steady, holding, the hum at the end of the universe. Not a warning, not a welcome. Something older than either. The sound the universe makes when it doesn't know it's being heard. That was the first episode of Vicious Planets. Astronaut X will return, at least once, in the Static Oracle Radio Hour, tentatively logged for transmission 20 weeks from now. If this one stayed with you, subscribe on YouTube for more tales from the end of things. Vicious Planets will also be available in podcast form every Tuesday for your commute. This episode is a work of fiction and commentary. Any references to law, medicine, or real-world systems are for storytelling purposes only and should not be taken as professional advice.